Princess Seraphina collapsed in the middle of the Galactic Senate the second Ethan Walker walked past her throne, crimson alarms flashing across the chamber as alien scientists screamed that a human male's natural hormones had triggered a royal heat response from 20 feet away. Ethan thought it was a joke until the pale-faced vampire princess grabbed his wrist and whispered, "How often can human males mate?" He blinked. Technically any time. The entire room went silent. Hours later, Ethan was locked inside the lunar palace with the most dangerous princess in the galaxy. And when the power suddenly failed that night, Seraphina's glowing red eyes slowly opened in the dark. "Human," she whispered shakily, "please don't leave me alone." The alien princess was never supposed to feel desire outside her mating cycle, but the second Ethan Walker entered the royal chamber, every warning light in the palace turned crimson. Scientists panicked as Seraphina's pale hands trembled against her throne. "Impossible," one whispered. "A human male triggered her from 30 feet away." Ethan laughed nervously until the princess stepped closer, her silver hair glowing under the emergency lights. "Human," she asked softly, "is it true your species can bond at any time?" Ethan shrugged. "Yeah, pretty much." The room fell dead silent. Then the palace doors suddenly sealed shut, and Seraphina's glowing red eyes locked onto him in the dark. The first sign of danger was not the alarm. It was the way the alien princess stopped breathing. The Senate Hall of Lunar Station Orion shimmered beneath miles of crystal glass and cold blue starlight. Hundreds of delegates from 23 star systems sat in perfect silence while holographic trade routes rotated slowly above the polished obsidian floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone, machine coolant, and the metallic bite of recycled oxygen. At exactly 9:14 p.m. station time, Ethan Walker stepped through the northern security gate carrying a coffee cup and a half-finished maintenance tablet, completely unaware he was about to trigger an interstellar incident. Ethan was not a soldier, not a diplomat, definitely not the kind of man who belonged near alien royalty. He was a xenobiology systems technician from Columbus, Ohio. 29 years old. White guy, brown hair, broad shoulders from years of hauling equipment through cramped service tunnels. The kind of human most people forgot 5 minutes after meeting. He liked black coffee, old baseball caps, and fixing problems quietly. That night, he was only there to repair a malfunctioning atmospheric sensor near the Senate balcony. Nothing important, nothing historic. Then Princess Seraphina Valeth looked at him. She sat high above the chamber in the royal observation tier, surrounded by silver-robed attendants and translucent energy screens glowing softly around her pale figure. Every story Ethan had heard about the Valeth dynasty suddenly felt inadequate. The princess looked less like a ruler and more like something carved from moonlight itself. Her skin was impossibly white beneath the dim violet lights. Silver hair spilled across the edge of her throne in soft waves. Her crimson eyes moved with calm, distant precision as delegates argued below her. Cold, elegant, untouchable, until Ethan walked into the room. Her expression changed instantly. The princess froze mid-breath. One pale hand tightened against the armrest. The holographic rings orbiting her throne flickered violently. At first, nobody noticed. Then the royal biomonitor behind her throne flashed amber. 1 second later, it turned crimson. A sharp electronic pulse echoed across the chamber. Heads turned immediately. Another warning siren followed. Louder this time. Ethan stopped walking. He muttered, lowering his coffee slightly. That can't be good. The princess suddenly stood from her throne too quickly, silver fabric rippling around her legs. Her breathing had become uneven. Not panicked. Worse, controlled. Like someone fighting to remain composed while standing too close to a fire. The royal attendants rushed toward her immediately. "Your Highness," one whispered urgently. Another checked the floating medical interface, now flooding with unreadable symbols. The translator struggled to keep up. Hormonal acceleration detected. Impossible. No active cycle scheduled. Source unknown. Ethan blinked slowly. "I'm sorry," he said to nobody in particular. "Did they just say hormonal?" The princess lifted her gaze again, directly at him. Ethan felt something strange then. Not fear. Pressure. Like the entire room had narrowed into silence around those crimson eyes. Seraphina took one slow step forward. Then another. The alarms intensified instantly. Several guards moved between them, hands hovering near glowing sidearms. But the princess ignored them completely. Her voice finally broke the silence. Soft, sharp, beautiful, human, she said carefully, as if testing the word itself. Approach. Ethan pointed at himself. Me? One of the royal scientists looked horrified. Do not move closer to Her Highness. But Serafina never looked away from Ethan. How often? She asked quietly. Can your species reproduce without entering a biological heat cycle? The entire Senate hall went still. Ethan stared at her for 2 full seconds. Then he gave the most human answer possible. Technically. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Anytime, I guess. The translator repeated his answer across 17 alien languages. Silence followed. Pure silence. Then every warning light in the royal chamber exploded crimson at once. The silence after Ethan answered lasted exactly 3.7 seconds before the Senate chamber descended into absolute chaos. Royal advisors began shouting over each other in at least 6 different languages, while holographic warning symbols spun violently across the ceiling dome. Crimson emergency lights painted the polished walls and pulses of red like a heartbeat echoing through the station. Ethan stood frozen near the security gate, still holding his coffee while 2 armored guards argued about whether he should be removed from the chamber or quarantined entirely. Okay, Ethan said slowly, raising one hand. I feel like everybody is overreacting a little. Nobody listened. Princess Serafina remained standing above the Senate floor, one pale hand resting against the edge of her throne as though grounding herself physically. Her silver hair shimmered softly beneath the flashing alarms, but her expression had changed. The cold royal mask was still there. Barely. Beneath it, Ethan noticed something else now. Confusion, curiosity, maybe even embarrassment. A tall alien scientist rushed toward the throne platform clutching a glowing medical tablet. His 4 mechanical lenses clicked rapidly as he scanned Ethan from across the room. Human endocrine levels are stable, he announced nervously. No chemical stimulants detected. No synthetic pheromones. This appears to be natural. Another advisor looked horrified. Natural? Ethan frowned. You guys keep saying that like it is illegal. A few guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The princess suddenly spoke again. Enough. Her voice was quiet, but the entire chamber obeyed instantly. The alarms dimmed to a softer pulse. Serafina slowly descended the curved silver staircase from the royal platform, while every pair of eyes followed her movements. Ethan felt his throat tighten slightly the closer she came. Up close, the princess looked even less human than before. Not monstrous, just different in subtle ways that made his instincts pay attention. Her skin almost reflected the station lights instead of absorbing them. Her crimson eyes held strange golden patterns near the center, like moving solar flares trapped beneath glass. Even the air around her felt cooler. She stopped less than 3 feet away from him. Ethan suddenly became very aware that he was still wearing grease-stained maintenance gloves. Serafina studied him carefully. You do not appear dangerous, she said at last. Ethan let out a nervous laugh. That is honestly the nicest thing anybody has said to me all week. One of the advisors nearly choked in disbelief that a human had joked directly to the princess's face. But Serafina did not seem offended. If anything, her expression softened slightly. Your species truly experiences no restricted fertility periods? She asked. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I mean, humans are complicated. But no, we do not really have mating seasons. The translator repeated his words through the chamber speakers. Several alien delegates physically recoiled. Ethan blinked. Seriously, he said. You all act like I admitted to being radioactive. The princess tilted her head slightly. Among the Valith bloodlines, reproductive cycles occur once every 9 standard years. During that period, emotional regulation becomes difficult. Ethan almost spilled his coffee. 9 years. She nodded once. Outside that cycle, physical attraction is nearly non-existent for our species. Ethan stared at her for a moment. Wow, he muttered. That honestly sounds kind of depressing. Several advisors gasped quietly at the comment. But Serafina did not react with anger. Instead, something strange flickered across her face again. Not offense. Thoughtfulness. Like nobody had ever pitted her before. Then the station lights flickered overhead. The princess suddenly inhaled sharply. Ethan saw it immediately this time. Her breathing changed again the second she looked directly at him. One royal scientist paled beneath his blue skin. "Your Highness," he whispered urgently. The response is intensifying. Serafina never broke eye contact with Ethan. "Human Ethan Walker," she said softly. "You will accompany me to the Lunar Palace immediately." Ethan blinked. "I am sorry," he said carefully. "Did a princess just kidnap me?" The shuttle ride to the Lunar Palace was the longest 15 minutes of Ethan Walker's life. No one spoke during takeoff. The royal transport glided silently through the black vacuum beyond Orion Station, while silver engine lights reflected across the curved cabin walls like ripples moving underwater. Ethan sat alone near the rear compartment, still wearing his maintenance uniform, while four armored royal guards watched him as though he might spontaneously explode. "I just want to point out," Ethan said eventually, breaking the suffocating silence, "that I literally came to work tonight expecting to fix an air filter." None of the guards reacted. One of them tightened his grip on a glowing spear-shaped weapon. Ethan sighed softly and looked out the window instead. The moon hung beneath them like frozen ash. Massive silver structures stretched across its surface in elegant spirals connected by glowing transit bridges and rotating towers taller than skyscrapers back on Earth. The Valith Lunar Palace did not look built. It looked grown. Smooth white metal curved upward like ivory bones beneath pale blue lights. Beautiful. Cold. Ancient. Ethan suddenly understood why humans found royal aliens unsettling. Everything about the place made him feel temporary. The shuttle landed with barely a sound. A soft hydraulic hiss echoed through the cabin as the rear door opened. Frigid air rolled inside immediately, carrying the sterile scent of polished metal and faint traces of unfamiliar flowers. Princess Serafina stepped off first without waiting for assistance. Her silver robes moved behind her in slow, graceful waves while attendants hurried to keep pace. Ethan followed cautiously 2 steps behind while staring at the palace interior. Vast corridors stretched endlessly beneath glowing crystal ceilings nearly 80 feet overhead. Thin streams of water flowed through transparent channels along the floor, emitting soft blue light from beneath the glass. Every footstep echoed. "Okay," Ethan muttered quietly. "This place officially makes Earth hotels look embarrassing." One nearby attendant glanced at him in visible confusion. Serafina heard him, though. Ethan noticed the smallest movement at the corner of her lips. Not quite a smile. Close. They entered a circular chamber lined with floating holographic screens and suspended medical scanners. Several royal scientists were already waiting nervously beside a massive transparent display filled with rotating human anatomy models. Ethan stopped walking immediately. "Oh no," he said. "I know that look. That is definitely a science experiment look." One elderly advisor adjusted his silver robes impatiently. "Human Ethan Walker, you will answer all biological inquiries truthfully for the safety of Her Highness and the stability of diplomatic relations." Ethan blinked twice. That sentence somehow made my life sound much worse. Serafina moved toward the center of the chamber while the lights dimmed around her automatically. Her pale face remained calm again, but Ethan noticed her breathing still changed subtly whenever she looked directly at him. The scientists noticed it too. Their instruments clicked faster each time. One finally spoke in disbelief. "The hormonal synchronization increases through prolonged proximity." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I feel like everybody keeps saying things that should probably stay private." No one laughed except Serafina. Barely. A soft sound. Quick enough Ethan almost imagined it. Then the princess turned toward him fully for the first time since leaving the Senate chamber. "Human Ethan Walker," she said carefully. "Your species forms emotional pair bonds before reproduction, correct?" Ethan shrugged slightly. "Usually, yeah. Humans date, fall in love, build relationships. That kind of thing." Several scientists immediately began whispering among themselves. One looked genuinely alarmed. "Emotional attachment before mating?" Ethan frowned. "Well, yes." Serafina's crimson eyes narrowed slightly with fascination. "Among the Valith bloodlines, emotional attachment occurs only after biological union. Never before." Ethan stared at her for a moment. "That sounds incredibly backward." The room froze instantly. Ethan winced. Sorry. I forget sometimes you are an actual princess." But Serafina did not appear offended. If anything, she seemed distracted by the answer itself. Curious, almost thoughtful. She slowly approached him again until only a few feet separated them. Ethan could see faint silver patterns moving beneath her pale skin now, like light passing through ice. Then humans willingly form emotional vulnerability before physical necessity, she asked softly. Ethan nodded once. That is kind of the whole point. Silence filled the chamber again. One scientist's biomonitor suddenly flashed crimson. Another looked visibly shaken while studying the readings. Your Highness, he whispered carefully. The humans' responses are accelerating the bond reaction. Ethan blinked. The what reaction? But Serafina never answered. She only looked directly into his eyes for several long seconds before speaking so quietly that only he could hear her. Human Ethan Walker, she whispered, I do not believe my people understand your species at all. By midnight, Ethan Walker had become the single most discussed human in the entire lunar palace. He discovered this after 3 separate royal scientists accidentally walked into a glass wall while staring at his hormone readings instead of the corridor ahead. I am starting to feel judged, Ethan muttered as another scanner passed slowly over his body with a low electronic hum. The medical chamber surrounding him glowed with soft blue light reflected through transparent panels filled with rotating streams of alien text. Somewhere beyond the walls, distant engines vibrated faintly beneath the palace foundation, like a sleeping machine buried deep under the moon. Ethan sat alone on the edge of an examination platform, wearing fresh black clothing provided by the palace staff. Apparently, his maintenance uniform had been declared biologically disruptive. He still was not sure if that was insulting or impressive. Across the chamber, a group of Valith advisors argued quietly around a suspended holographic model of the human nervous system. Every few seconds, one of them glanced toward Ethan with visible concern. Okay, Ethan finally said, leaning back slightly. I need somebody to explain why your entire civilization reacts to basic human biology like I am carrying a loaded weapon. The room went silent. One older scientist slowly turned toward him. His pale silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Because to our species, he said carefully, you may be. Ethan laughed once. Nobody else did. That was usually a bad sign. The scientist touched the holographic display, causing thousands of glowing neural pathways to bloom across the air between them. The Valith evolved under strict biological cycles, he explained. Attraction, pair bonding, emotional synchronization. All controlled. All predictable. Ethan nodded slowly. And humans are not predictable. No, the scientist admitted quietly. Your species forms attachment continuously. Emotional dependency without biological necessity. Loyalty independent of reproductive timing. Such behavior appears unstable to us. Ethan frowned slightly. You make love sound like a software malfunction. Several scientists exchanged uneasy looks. One younger advisor finally spoke. Among the noble bloodlines, uncontrolled attachment historically led to societal collapse. Ethan blinked. Wait, your people regulated emotions because feelings were considered dangerous. No one answered immediately. That alone told Ethan enough. He leaned back against the cold metal wall, suddenly understanding why Serafina always looked so composed, so distant. Her entire culture had trained emotional restraint into something sacred. Then the chamber doors opened quietly behind him. Every scientist immediately straightened. Princess Serafina entered alone this time without guards or attendants. Silver fabric flowed softly around her pale figure while the room lights dimmed automatically in response to her presence. Ethan noticed something different immediately. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying invisible weight for too long. Her crimson eyes met his across the chamber. The biomonitors instantly accelerated again. One scientist muttered something nervous under his breath. Serafina ignored them completely. Leave us, she said calmly. The advisors hesitated. Your Highness, one protested carefully. Continued proximity may intensify the synchronization effect. Serafina's gaze never left Ethan. That was not a request. Within seconds the chamber emptied. The massive door sealed shut behind them with a soft hydraulic thud. Silence settled over the room. Ethan exhaled slowly. So, he said carefully, is it normal for alien princesses to terrify entire governments? Serafina moved toward the observation window, overlooking the moonlit city below. Pale towers glowed beneath drifting streams of silver traffic, while stars reflected across the curved glass around her. "I did not request your presence to frighten you," she said softly. Ethan studied her for a moment. "Then why am I here?" Serafina remained quiet for several long seconds before answering. "Because when you entered the Senate chamber tonight," she whispered, "my body reacted before my mind could." Ethan said nothing. The princess slowly turned toward him again. Her pale expression remained composed, but her voice carried something fragile beneath it now. Something uncertain. "That has never happened to me before." Ethan suddenly did not know where to look. The silence between them felt heavier now somehow. More personal. Then Serafina stepped closer again. Not enough to touch him. Just enough that Ethan could feel the cold air surrounding her skin. "Human Ethan Walker," she asked quietly, "is emotional attachment always this frightening for your species?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering honestly. "Yeah," he said softly. "Pretty much every time." The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of soft music drifting through the palace walls like distant water moving beneath ice. For a few confused seconds he forgot where he was. Then he opened his eyes and saw the curved silver ceiling above him glowing faintly blue with artificial moonlight. In reality, hit all at once. Alien palace. Vampire princess. Biological crisis. Fantastic. Ethan sat up slowly on the edge of the bed provided for him inside the royal guest chamber. The room was larger than his entire apartment back on Earth. Thin streams of illuminated water flowed beneath transparent floor panels, while soft white curtains moved gently from hidden air vents. Even the temperature felt carefully controlled, cool enough to relax the body. Almost too perfect. "This place does not even allow dust," Ethan muttered to himself. A nearby wall immediately responded in a calm electronic voice. "Air purity levels are maintained at 99.9%. Ethan jumped slightly. "Okay, great. The walls are listening now." Before he could process that further, the chamber doors slid open silently. Princess Serafina entered alone, carrying 2 steaming cups resting carefully on a silver tray. Ethan blinked in surprise. The future ruler of an interstellar dynasty was personally bringing him breakfast. "I am either extremely important," he said carefully, "or your people are really bad at boundaries." Serafina ignored the comment at first. She placed 1 cup gently beside him before sitting across from him near the observation window overlooking the lunar skyline. Pale morning light reflected softly against her white skin, making her look almost unreal again, yet somehow less distant than before. "The palace culinary staff researched human caffeine dependency overnight," she said calmly. Ethan lifted the cup and smelled fresh coffee immediately. Real coffee, not synthetic station liquid. His eyes widened. "You have no idea how much I suddenly appreciate your civilization." For the first time since meeting her, Serafina smiled openly. Small, quiet, but real. Ethan nearly forgot how to speak for half a second. The princess noticed. Her crimson eyes lowered slightly toward the steam rising from her own untouched cup. "Among the Valith," she said softly, "sharing morning nourishment is considered deeply personal." Ethan almost choked on his coffee. "You probably should have warned me before saying that." Serafina tilted her head. "Why?" Ethan rubbed his forehead slowly. "Because on Earth that sounds dangerously close to flirting." The princess froze completely. Ethan immediately regretted speaking. "I mean not dangerous, he corrected quickly. "Human dangerous. Different dangerous." Serafina looked down into her cup quietly while soft light shimmered across her silver hair. "Your species attaches emotional meaning to small rituals," she said after a moment. "Food, touch, eye contact, conversation." Ethan shrugged slightly. "That is because humans are emotional creatures. Even your males." Ethan laughed softly. "Especially our males. We just pretend otherwise." That answer seemed to genuinely confuse her. Ethan could see it in the way her expression tightened slightly, as though she was trying to solve an equation that refused to make sense. "Among my people," she admitted quietly, "males rarely display emotional vulnerability publicly." Ethan leaned back comfortably. "Trust me, human men are terrified of vulnerability too. We just get lonely enough eventually." Serafina stared at him for several long seconds. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed. Softly at first, barely more than breath. But it was real laughter. Warm. Honest. Ethan blinked in surprise. The sound changed the entire room somehow. The cold royal atmosphere cracked just enough for him to finally see the woman beneath the title. And suddenly she did not feel untouchable anymore. Just lonely. The moment lasted only seconds before the chamber doors suddenly opened again. 3 royal advisors entered carrying glowing tablets and visibly tense expressions. The warmth vanished immediately from the room. One advisor bowed quickly toward the princess. "Your Highness," he said carefully. The synchronization readings increased another 18% overnight. Ethan frowned. Synchronization still sounds like a disease. But none of the advisors looked amused. One finally glanced toward Ethan with visible concern. "Human Ethan Walker," he said slowly. "The Palace Council has reached a preliminary conclusion regarding your species." Ethan took another sip of coffee. "That sounds ominous." The advisor hesitated before speaking. "We believe humans may be biologically capable of creating emotional dependency in other species." The room went completely silent. Ethan slowly lowered his cup. "I am sorry," he said carefully. "Are you accusing humanity of weaponized affection?" The accusation should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it hung in the air like a genuine security threat. Ethan stared at the royal advisors surrounding him while the soft blue lights of the chamber reflected across their pale faces. Not one of them appeared to be joking. "Weaponized affection," Ethan repeated slowly. "That is honestly the most human thing anybody has ever said about us." One advisor tightened his grip around the glowing tablet in his hands. "Your species forms attachments at alarming speed," he explained carefully. "You exchange physical gestures casually. You maintain eye contact during emotional communication. You create pair bonding through repetitive social rituals." Ethan blinked once. "You mean friendship?" The advisors exchanged uneasy looks again. Serafina remained silent near the observation window, listening carefully. The scientist continued. "Among the Valeth, physical proximity carries biological significance. Emotional intimacy is regulated to prevent dependency responses." Ethan leaned back against the chair with disbelief written clearly across his face. "So your civilization spent thousands of years turning emotions into government policy." "Correct." Ethan laughed quietly to himself. "Wow. Humans would fail your society in under 6 minutes." For the first time, Serafina spoke again. "That is becoming increasingly obvious." Ethan looked toward her. The princess stood with her silver hair glowing faintly beneath the palace lights, while Earth floated silently behind her through the massive observation glass. From this distance, the blue planet looked fragile. Small. Ethan suddenly missed home more than expected. "Look," he said more gently now. "Humans are emotional because life is short for us. We connect quickly because we know we can lose each other quickly too." The room became quiet again. One younger advisor frowned slightly. "Your average lifespan is under 100 years, he said carefully. "Correct." Ethan nodded. "If we are lucky." Several Valeth exchanged subtle looks of visible discomfort. Their species commonly lived for centuries. To them, humans probably looked temporary. Fast-burning. Fragile. Serafina slowly walked closer until she stood beside Ethan's chair. "And this knowledge," she asked softly, "drives humans to form attachments despite inevitable loss." Ethan looked up at her. "No," he answered quietly. "It is exactly why we do it." The silence afterward felt different this time. Heavier. One advisor finally lowered his tablet slowly. "Your species willingly accepts emotional pain?" Ethan shrugged slightly. "Every meaningful relationship comes with risk." The scientist looked genuinely unsettled by that answer. Serafina did not. If anything, her expression softened again. Ethan noticed she had begun standing closer to him lately without realizing it. Small distances. A few feet at first. Then inches. Like her instincts kept adjusting around him faster than her mind could process. One of the palace systems suddenly chimed overhead. A calm electronic voice echoed softly through the chamber. "Royal synchronization levels have exceeded acceptable thresholds." Every advisor immediately stiffened. Ethan rubbed his forehead. "I really hate the way that sentence sounds." The older scientist stepped forward carefully. "Your Highness, continued private interaction may destabilize your endocrine regulation further." Serafina's eyes never left Ethan. "Noted." We strongly advise isolation protocols. Ethan raised both hands. Okay, hold on. Nobody is isolating anybody. I am literally just sitting here drinking coffee and explaining basic human behavior. Precisely, the scientist replied nervously. That is the concern. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. You are telling me kindness is biologically dangerous to your species? No one answered immediately. Serafina finally looked down slightly before speaking in a voice softer than before. Among my people, she admitted quietly, kindness is often mistaken for attachment. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest hearing that. Suddenly her loneliness made sense. The careful posture, the emotional distance, the constant control. She had grown up inside a culture terrified of vulnerability. Ethan stood slowly from the chair. That sounds exhausting, he said honestly. Several advisors looked horrified by his tone toward royalty. But Serafina only looked surprised. Ethan hesitated briefly before doing something entirely instinctive. He gently removed the heavy black jacket from his shoulders and held it toward her. Here, he said casually. The room is freezing. The entire chamber froze instantly. Every advisor looked genuinely stunned. Serafina stared at the jacket in silence as though it were something dangerous. Ethan frowned slightly. It is just a coat. Slowly, carefully, she accepted it from his hands. Her pale fingers brushed his skin for less than a second. Every monitor in the chamber immediately flashed crimson. The moment Serafina's fingers touched Ethan's hand, every system inside the chamber erupted into flashing crimson light. Warning tones echoed violently through the palace walls, while holographic symbols exploded across the floating displays overhead. Ethan nearly dropped his coffee. Okay, he said quickly, stepping backward. That definitely feels dramatic for accidental hand contact. But nobody answered him. The royal advisors stared at the monitors in visible panic, while streams of alien text raced faster across the screens than Ethan could follow. One scientist's voice trembled slightly. Synchronization spike confirmed. Another looked pale beneath the blue chamber lights. Emotional resonance levels are exceeding historical records. Ethan rubbed his forehead slowly. I swear humans are usually less stressful than this. Serafina remained completely still in the center of the room, Ethan's black jacket draped loosely around her shoulders. Against the dark fabric, her white skin looked almost luminous beneath the palace lights. But her expression had changed again. The careful emotional control she carried so naturally was beginning to crack around the edges. Ethan noticed it in her breathing first, then in the way her crimson eyes kept returning to him instinctively, like part of her attention refused to move elsewhere. One advisor stepped toward the princess nervously. Your Highness, immediate separation protocols are now strongly advised. Serafina did not look at him. Denied. But the bond response, denied. Her voice remained calm, but the room fell silent immediately afterward. Ethan sighed quietly. Can somebody please stop calling this a bond response? It sounds like we accidentally got married. Nobody laughed again. Ethan was beginning to hate that. A low vibration suddenly rolled through the palace floor beneath their feet. The lights flickered once overhead. Then again, several scientists looked upward in alarm. Power fluctuation detected in the Western energy grid, one announced urgently. Another checked his monitor. The lunar shield reactors are rerouting power. Ethan immediately recognized the tone in their voices. Technical panic sounded the same in every species. How bad is it? He asked. Temporary. One scientist replied too quickly, which usually meant not temporary at all. Then the chamber lights abruptly died. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. A few emergency strips along the floor activated seconds later, bathing everything in dim red illumination. Ethan heard several advisors curse under their breath while equipment powered down around them with soft electronic clicks. Somewhere deep inside the palace, heavy containment doors began, sealing automatically. Serafina inhaled sharply. Ethan turned immediately toward her. Even in the darkness, he could see the tension in her posture now. Her breathing had become uneven again. Not frightened, strained, like she was fighting against something internal. Princess? He asked carefully. No answer came for several seconds. Then her voice emerged softly from the shadows. The pheromone regulation systems have shut down. Ethan blinked once. I am sorry. The what systems? One advisor's voice echoed nervously through the darkness. The palace atmosphere normally suppresses elevated Valith biological responses. Ethan stared into the dim red light. You are telling me your entire royal family lives inside an emotional air conditioner? Nobody corrected him. That was enough confirmation. Another low vibration rolled through the chamber. Seraphina suddenly steadied herself against the nearby wall. Ethan saw it immediately. Her hands were trembling slightly now. The advisors looked deeply unsettled. One finally stepped backward toward the exit corridor. Your Highness, he whispered carefully. Until power stabilizes, close proximity to the human may intensify your condition further. Ethan looked toward her again. Even in the darkness, her crimson eyes seemed brighter now somehow. More alive, more vulnerable. For the first time since meeting her, she did not look like royalty. She looked overwhelmed. Alone. Human in all the ways that mattered. The advisors slowly withdrew from the chamber one by one, leaving only emergency lights and silence behind them. The heavy door sealed automatically after the last one exited. Ethan exhaled quietly. Well, he muttered softly. This feels medically irresponsible. Seraphina leaned against the wall near the observation glass, breathing slowly as Earth glowed faintly behind her through the darkness. Ethan hesitated only briefly before walking closer. Not too close. Just enough that she would not feel alone in the silence. You okay? He asked gently. Seraphina closed her eyes for a moment before answering. No, she whispered honestly. Ethan nodded once. Yeah, he said softly. That usually helps more than pretending. Her crimson eyes slowly opened again. And for the first time since arriving at the palace, Princess Seraphina Valith looked at Ethan Walker not like a biological anomaly, not like a dangerous human, but like someone she trusted to stay.